All right, good morning on this Tuesday. It's the 25th, and big changes in the cable news firmament. At Fox, Tucker's out, number one rated cable news program, and that actually was announced while I was doing my program yesterday. I saw the news come in, didn't say anything because I was, focused on this stuff, but what I was doing yesterday, but now we'll talk about it today along with maybe a little more briefly the lemon discharge from the CNN anchor's desk over there. He had his own program, and well, AOC, she couldn't be happier. She talked about this with our friend Jen Psaki at MSNBC. Friend, maybe in air quotes. I'm not really a huge fan of, I hate to say it, either of those two women at this point, but we'll play that video in just a moment. I do want to thank the Hill Rising. That is a very, very good program for a lot of the information, giving me some background that I didn't have, and also steering me to some of the videos that we're going to play for you this morning. I do hope you'll join me, 363-7190, 363-7190. We had some tech issues yesterday. Hopefully they're largely fixed. We always have problems, right? It just seems like it's never solved. It's just a journey that we never get to an end. I am awaiting some better quality equipment. I had a top professional mic being repaired, and I was using one that was of inferior quality. It went kablooey on me yesterday. I'm hoping today things go a little better. All right, so here is AOC with Jen Psaki on MSNBC talking about Carlson and why she is certainly not going to shed any tears whatsoever. Let's get to it.
What is permissible on air, and we saw that with January 6th, and we saw that in the lead up to January 6th, and how we navigate questions not just of freedom of speech, but also accountability for incitement of violence. This is the line that we have to really explore through law as well. And
do you think media organizations or social media platforms should be accountable for the role for being platforms for incitement?
I believe that when it comes to broadcast television, like Fox News, these are subject to federal law, federal regulation in terms of what's allowed on air and what isn't. And when you look at what Tucker Carlson and some of these other folks on Fox do, it is very, very clearly incitement of violence.
All right, so let me see, I think I was going right. You're hearing me, I hope. Let's figure that out. I assume, I don't know. Maybe I muted myself. I think I have two mics or something. I don't know. Carlson trying to pretend that this wasn't happening. And but he couldn't completely do it. So he said, if Sidney Powell, the lawyer for Trump, can find some evidence, then no one would be happier than we, because we want to find voter fraud. But he didn't admit it. He acknowledged he hadn't seen any of it. And I want to see if I can let's see if we can get to the video where he talks about that. And it was in the post, so let's see where we can see where let's get to my better. Here we go. There we go. He just doesn't ever come out and say there was some kind of dirty doings that changed the result. And I think that's what is my takeaway, is that, if you want to blame Carlson, find the evidence that he claimed this was a fraudulent election. And I don't see it. And AOC doesn't see it.
Normal people are becoming paranoid. Americans who love this country are beginning to fear it. Why? We know exactly why. Because shutting down legitimate discourse and inquiry always has that effect. It destroys social trust and it sets the table for awful things to come. So let's stop this right now. Slow down. No hasty calls. Our system works. It has worked before. If people air concerns, resolve the concerns. Don't call them names. Don't sweep those concerns under the rug. Don't shut it down artificially with unelected news anchors. Let our system work.
All right, so what Carlson's doing there is he's really, really skating a thin line. He is claiming that we shouldn't just shut down allegations of election fraud. And these allegations were absolutely bogus. There was zero evidence. It's not just that there was zero evidence that there was fraud. It was very clear there wasn't fraud. Nobody has unearthed anything that suggests that Biden didn't get more votes in the decisive states. He did. But Carlson never says that's not the case. Carlson never says, "Oh, it's wrong. Trump really won. Trump should be the president." He doesn't say that. He says, "Oh, well, let's just listen. Let's just hear." Now, I think that's irresponsible. And I'm not trying to defend, again, maybe I'm trying to defend him. His audience is saying Trump won. His audience is saying this is BS. His audience bought into it. And he's trying to keep that audience while not lie. And I got to say, I think he did that. So again, he's not misrepresenting the situation. He's not saying, he's not lying. He's not saying, okay, Trump really won. He's saying, let's listen to all the evidence. But at the same time, he never says there's anything that suggests that he's seen that Trump really should have been elected. He's not lying. And that was what that whole lawsuit was about. Now, I think the reason Carlson was fired is because he presented pro-peace views on his program. He presented pro-working class views on his program. And he also got fired because he gets paid $20 million a year, and they just had to pay $800 million. And there was another problem. Carlson's texts and emails were very, very disparaging of the Stop the Steal people, the people who claimed that Trump was falsely declared loser. He gave a strength to the plaintiffs, Dominion, who said, "You're full of crap. You're saying that our voting machines were rigged, and that's not true. They weren't rigged. You have no evidence." And it was pretty powerful, pretty powerful evidence in support of the claim against Fox. Carlson was a strong witness against Fox, and they didn't like it. And who can blame him? So I want to play some more here because Carlson is really reviled on the left. I mean, he is just despised. And I seriously don't fully get it. I just don't. I mean, this is the guy who said we shouldn't be in Ukraine. This is the guy who's saying that the trade deals, that, working people deserve better, that corporations have too much power, that the war in Iraq was a terrible, terrible mistake. He's come out and apologized for supporting it. So I don't really get the hatred for him on the left. I want to hear from you. 240-363-7190. If you are on the other side of this, please tell me why I'm wrong. 240-363-7190. Love to hear your take on what I'm missing here, because I'm sure, I'm like Carlson. Carlson didn't want to offend his audience. That's why he went out there and tried to kind of thread that needle by not actually acknowledging or stating flat out there's no fraud, while at the same time not saying there was fraud. And he did that. So I don't know how, look, if you disagree that's, I don't know how that's It's not great journalism. I think it's not journalism at all. A good journalist tells the truth. A good journalist says what their audiences don't want to hear. But did you ever get that and I'm not a big whataboutism person either. But honestly, if you're going to go after Carlson here, I think you have a duty to make the same criticism and at much greater, much more powerfully against MSNBC and Rachel Maddow for telling you for 4 years that Russiagate was real and that Trump conspired with Putin. Because that is just false. And they kept telling you that over and over and over and over again. And that was extremely damaging to our democracy too. So remember, these are the most damning clips the Washington Post could come up with to go after Carlson.
So was there voter fraud last week? That's a question we've been working on since election night. We've tried to be careful and precise as we report this out. In moments like this, truth really matters more than ever. False allegations of fraud can cause as much damage as the fraud itself. Jussie Smollett.
All right, so let me stop that. He right there says it. False allegations of fraud can cause as much damage as the fraud itself. If there isn't fraud, obviously, if there's fraud, then the allegations aren't false. I don't think there's anything there you can really take issue with. He's talking to an audience, the largest audience in cable news. Carlson is talking to an audience right there that is dead set certain, in part because of what else they've heard on Fox, that there was fraud, that Trump really should have been the president. He's talking to them in November. He asked, was there fraud? So we'll play the rest of it. But I'm not finding anything there to call Carlson a liar.
More people with his lies than any actual hate crime. And the last thing America needs right now is more damage. So we want to be accurate. What we're about to tell you is accurate. It's not a theory. It happened, and we can prove it. Other news organizations could prove it too. They've simply chosen not to. The position of corporate media across the country this week has been very simple. There was no voter fraud.
All right, and that is true. I mean, that was the position of corporate media, and they were right. There was no voter fraud. What he then goes into is basically ignore the story. He says, we're going to tell you what really happened, and then he doesn't. There's no real he talks to people who claim, like Matt Gaetz and others, but there's no conclusion that there was fraud from Carlson. He never says, okay, this, I guess he has a few individual stories, but he also acknowledges we've heard nothing that says that this had any impact on the election. So I'm not really, I'm trying, I mean, you heard again what the clip there, we're trying to find something, but we haven't found it. We'll be glad if they find it, but it's not there. And I'll just play one more of these, and I want to get to the January 6th, because January 6th is where AOC says that Carlson's responsible, that he caused the violence. So where is that? Again, if you're going to go, let's hear it, because these are the people, this is, I guess our progressive heroes out there, supposedly. Where's the evidence? Because I don't hear it, I don't see it.
They have not seen Powell's evidence either. No testimony from employees.
All right, so Powell is the lawyer for Trump who's claiming, falsely, there's election fraud. Sidney Powell saying Donald Trump got more votes. He should be president. And Carlson says, well, we haven't seen it. Where is it?
Inside the software companies, no damning internal documents, no copies of the software.
All right, so Carlson's telling his audience, we've got nothing. We've got no testimony from employees at the software companies, no damning internal documents. In other words, that say, we're going to give the election to Biden. And no copies of the software itself.
So that's where we are. Sidney Powell came on Fox this morning and suggested we may not have to wait much longer. I fully expect, she says, that we will be able to prove all of it in a court within the next 2 weeks. Well, as far as we're concerned, that is great news. If Sidney Powell can prove that technology companies switched millions of votes and stole a presidential election, she will have almost single-handedly uncovered the greatest crime in the history of this country, and no one will be more grateful for that than us.
All right, so he's saying, hey, if she can do it, great. So far, we ain't seen nothing. Look, don't we believe if you're to be guilty of a crime, it's got to be proven? And it seems there, again, pretty darn clear, he did not tell his audience that there was voter fraud or election fraud. Carlson just didn't do it. He did a lot of things he shouldn't have done. But he didn't traffic in election fraud conspiracies. And in fact, the Times and the Post acknowledge that. All right, I want to move on because it's 11:20. Again, I do this program, I want to hear from you. This is a conversation. I know when I go on and stream and say Tucker Carlson isn't the Antichrist, Trump isn't the worst president of all time, I know that rankles people. I have specific goals in mind. What I want is I want everyone in this country to have health care. I want everyone to have enough to eat. I want everyone to have an interesting, remunerative job. I want peace. That's what I want. I think that those wants are most likely to happen if we are clear-eyed, if we are honest, if we look at the world that we live in without blinders. And if we perceive certain people as just the complete enemy based on partisanship, based on what we read in elite newspapers that have an agenda that's very different than my own, and that I presume is very different than your own, if we perceive one party and its allies as the enemy, and that we must defeat that enemy regardless of anything else, then we're not going to get what I want and what I think you want. Again, everyone has health care. Everyone gets a decent education. Everyone has enough, and nobody has too much. We're not getting there if we paint Tucker Carlson as an unregenerate liar whose everything he's done is wrong, and at the same time view Trump as, again, I said Carlson, Trump is the Antichrist. It's not going to happen. We've got to be willing to look at the world with some degree of nuance, with the recognition that neither party is on our side, that they both are on the side of the billionaire class, and that the actions that they're taking are harming us. What AOC said on Jen Psaki's show is not true. She is carrying water for Nancy Pelosi. Well, at this time, it's not Nancy Pelosi anymore. I guess it's Hakeem Jeffries. They're not on your side either. Joe Biden's not on your side either. All right, let's get to this last thing. This is about January 6th, because remember what AOC is saying, that Carlson needs to be canceled, needs to be gone from the airwaves, needs to be completely ignored forever and a day because he fomented violence on January 6th. So did he do that? This is the last show I believe I can find. Anyway, this is on January 4. And this is from, again, the Washington Post. I couldn't find anything that was after the 4th, but before the 6th. Remember, the riots occurred during the day of the 6th. So Carlson comes on at night. If he did a show on the 6th, it would have been after the riot. So it wouldn't be, a trigger. So what happened on the 4th? What happened on the 5th? And let's find out. Let's find out for ourselves here.
The president, as you may have heard, believes the election was stolen from him. Georgia's Secretary of State, whose job it is to oversee elections, disagrees. You can listen to the call yourself. It's online, and you can make up your own mind about who's right on that question. And by the way, if you have time, you ought to do that. It's interesting. But no matter...
All right, so again, Carlson never says that somehow the election was rigged. He says what's absolutely true. Trump believes, or at least we don't even know what Trump believes, so it's not true that when Carlson says Trump believes the election was stolen, he doesn't know that Trump believes that. He knows Trump is saying that. I'm of the mind that Trump is such a narcissist and so self-aggrandizing, he probably did really believe it. But we don't know that. What Carlson should say is Trump claims the election was stolen. But he doesn't say it. He says believes. All right, I'll give him a pass because the media always says believes rather than claims or states or argues, which is what the verbs they should use. But it's true. Trump was claiming the election was stolen. And the Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, whose job is to oversee elections, does disagree. That is true. And then he says, you can listen to your call yourself. It's online and make up your own mind. How is that dishonest? You might say he should come out and say, well, Raffensperger's telling the truth. He doesn't want to lose his audience, okay? I mean, that's the bottom line. He just doesn't want to lose his audience. I'm not saying that's great. I'm not saying that's honorable. I'm saying that ain't illegal. That ain't dishonest. That ain't violating anybody's rights. If that doesn't deserve that you should be canceled. So then he goes on to say, because I think this is interesting.
No matter what you conclude about vote counting in Georgia, we are willing to bet that you won't decide Donald Trump's latest phone call is the single most important thing happening in the world right now.
All right, I thought it was pretty important. I mean, that's just BS. He's trying to minimize this, but if anything, he's trying to tamp it down, right? He's saying, hey, let's all pull back. It's hard to view that as inciting violence. There was a little bug flying by. It's hard to, I can't see that. How is that inciting violence? Say, well, this isn't that important. That Trump is calling Raffensperger and claiming the election was stolen. Obviously, what he's saying is it wasn't stolen. If it was stolen, this would be a really big deal. So Carlson's saying, come on. Let's move on. It's not an incitement to violence. It's the opposite.
Probably not even close. And yet CNN is claiming that it is. Why are they doing that? Well, that's a good question and worth pondering. Do you notice a theme here? Manipulation, maybe? Ignore the details. Don't ask questions. Here's the latest outrage. Take the bait. Get mad about it, Trump's phone call in this case, and move on. Write a grouchy Instagram post if you want. But whatever you do, do not think for yourself.
All right, so I'll let it go at that point. That's news. Look, the president tries to overturn an election, tries to persuade a Secretary of State not to certify results or come up with some BS explanation for why, that the Georgia really went for Trump. I mean, that's obviously incredibly important, and it should be covered. And for Carlson to try to minimize it, it's wrong. It's irresponsible. But it's not a lie, exactly. He's not saying something happened that didn't happen, or something didn't happen that did. And he's certainly not calling for violence. Just the opposite. So the bottom line is AOC is just bloviating. And it's so friggin' sad. It's so unfortunate. She should be our champion. She should be calling out the Biden administration for its failures. She should be talking about why, despite the fact that Trump is, a hustler, a phony, a game show host, despite the fact that he's clearly undeserving, unwilling, incompetent, that he has many, many millions of followers. She should, like Bernie, who went on Psaki's show. Remember, we played it and said, well, the question is why? Why is Trump popular? What's wrong with our country? What's wrong with our party that he has so much support? And so my question to AOC is, why won't you do that? What's that about? Are you really progressive? Are you really an ally of the left? I don't. We're not seeing that. We're not seeing that. She's just trying to solidify her bona fides in the Democratic Party. And that's, frankly, the absolute last thing I want her or anyone else to do. All right, I'm going to end this Carlson segment. I want to play, I was, again, I've given probably too much oxygen to the team over at Rising, Robbie and Brianna. But I think they do a really good show. And look, again, I do this. Well, I love to do it. I want to do it. I want to be popular. I want to be big. I want all that to happen for me. So I want you to click like. I want you to subscribe. I want you to tell all your friends. I want you to email links to this show and all my shows to everyone you know. I want you to tweet. I want you to do all those things. But I do this because I really, in the end, want a better world. It sounds self-aggrandizing, but it's true. I could say, well, if I really was just doing it for myself, I would, be a practice corporate law or something and make a lot of money. I wouldn't be successful at that. Nobody would, people wouldn't hire me. I wouldn't want to do it. I wouldn't enjoy that, but I could still do organizing and stuff and make a decent living. But I focus on this because I really want things to be better. I want them to be better for my children. I want them to be better for if I have grandchildren, I want them to be better for everybody. And I think that there are other live streams that do a nice job and that really present the information and the arguments that I make well. So I wanted to play this because Robbie Suave from The Rising kind of sums up why I have a bittersweet response, this bittersweet feeling, and maybe more bitter than sweet that Carlson's out.
I mean, he gave a platform to some kind of, contrarian that is, for instance, on foreign policy, that is now very much associated with the right, that was to a significant degree his due. It was his personal attitude on those matters was very much not in step with the old kind of neocon consensus. He did meaningfully shift the foreign policy consensus on the right in his direction, in the libertarian or populist or not the non-interventionist direction. I was on his hour of TV a bunch of times back in 2018, 2019, I think, when the Covington scandal happened.
All right, so I'll stop that. That's the Covington scandal is totally irrelevant to this discussion. He moved, as Suave says, the consensus in the Republican Party away from interventionism, away from PNAC, right? Project for a New American Century. He moved it away from the George W. Bush, Dick Cheney, endless war. America is some kind of special the neocon, American exceptionalism worldview that was completely adopted and followed on Henry Kissinger, that Madeleine Albright, that Hillary Clinton, they all embraced, and that Obama embraced. And it was a really good thing. That's a really, really, really good thing. We need a party that is against endless war. And you can see on the screen exactly why that is. Millions, because of the war in Ukraine, millions have been uprooted. They need humanitarian assistance. This is an absolute disaster. It's a human tragedy of epic proportions, just like Iraq, just like Libya, just like Somalia, just like what we're seeing in Sudan right now. We need to be a force for peace. And we're not. We're a force for war. And to to ignore that Carlson had pro-peace voices on his program, that Carlson spoke out against the war in Iraq, is to miss an enormous piece of the puzzle. This is not a little thing. This is an incredibly important thing. And that is why I have mixed feelings about Carlson going, because, there were a lot of problematic aspects, and there was legitimate claims that he was sexist and treated people badly on his staff, which I don't like. I treat people, I respond to politicians and media people mostly based on what they do. That impacts me. What they do behind the scenes is less important. But I still want people to treat others with just respect and dignity, and there are credible claims Carlson wasn't great at that. I don't like that. I think there was an undercurrent of racism on occasion. I think his white populism was to some extent racist. I think that's been overblown as well, but I think it was there. So these are serious issues that we need to grapple with. But you cannot ignore the pro-peace voice either that he provided. That was very, very meaningful. All right, I'm going to move on to the next. I guess we got to admit this is a little less meaningful, right? I mean, this is a guy who had far smaller audience, was far less important to the news media, and that's Don Lemon. And, pretty innocuous. I never watched either. To be honest, I never watched either one. I never watched Carlson. I don't watch cable news. But every now and then I would see them if they were on a YouTube video by someone I watch. But here is what Lemon said that some people claim is why, was behind his firing, his termination from CNN.
She says people, politicians or something are not in their.
All right, he's talking about Nikki Haley, the former South Carolina governor, who had announced when he was on CNN that she was running for president on the, in the Republican primaries.
Prime. Nikki Haley isn't in her prime. Sorry, when a woman is considered to be in her prime in her 20s and 30s and maybe 40s.
What are you talking? Wait.
So she's 51, and remember, Trump is in his mid to late 70s. Biden will be, 80. I guess he's 80 now. It's ridiculous, so he's saying, oh, she's not in her prime. So, why do you say something so stupid? But let me just continue. So this is what some people claim is why Lemon got fired. And by the way, you can see this is from the New York Post. I hate to rely on the Post. It's pretty pathetic. But that said, they did have the clip, and I wanted to play it.
That's not according to me.
Prime for what?
It depends. It's just like prime. If you look it up, if you Google when is a woman in her prime, it'll say 20s, 30s, and 40s. I don't necessarily.
40s. Oh, I got another.
I'm not saying
decade.
I agree with that. So I think she has to be careful about saying that politicians aren't in their prime.
We need to qualify. Are you talking about prime for like childbearing, or are you talking about prime for being president?
What the facts are.
All right. So he's not even trying to yet that he's stuck his foot in it, in some deep doo-doo. He doesn't even get it. So that's pretty bad. You're really, it's just BS. When she's not in her prime, it's terrible. I don't know where to go with that. He says a 51-year-old woman isn't in her prime. Well, maybe she's, post-menopause. I don't know. It's about the time when women enter menopause. So maybe that's what he's saying. He could have said that. He could have said, yeah. And plus, it's not really. It's wholly irrelevant. Obviously, former Governor Haley is in the ideal age to run for president. Now, I wouldn't support her at this point, but her age would be a very attractive factor for many, many voters, and for me as well. So, but that's not why Don Lemon was fired. It just wasn't. That wasn't why. I don't think. I mean, I can't. I'm not the head of the suits at the cable, at CNN. Is it the cable news? Is that what CNN stands for? Cable news network? I think so. I'm not in their head. So I ultimately don't know why Don Lemon was fired. But again, going back to our friends at the New York Post, this is why I think he was fired. After he was suspended for 3 days because of those remarks about Nikki Haley, the ratings went up for his show, getting him off. And he used to do a night show, then they put him in the morning because they couldn't find a fit. Well, that's why he was fired, because his ratings sucked. Nobody watched his show. That's all. It's just that simple. I mean, there's nothing else to that. It's just that simple. I mean, and unlike Carlson, who has a huge audience, sorry about that, folks. Carlson has a huge audience. He'll have no trouble finding other work, including if he wants to do a live stream or a video cast or whatever, a podcast. He's going to have 1 million subscribers. He'll have 2 million. He'll have 3 million subscribers. And I'm trying to get to 100, which, by the way, again, click like, click subscribe. All right, I want to move on. It's 11:41. I never go over an hour. I wanted to get to this story about Kenyon. I want to go back. So I talked about Kenyon College. This is going to be my last story. If you want to join me, you can. 240-363-7190. Should be able to get you on the air. I think maybe I can. I don't know. I'll try. 240-363-7190 if you want to join me. And I'm going to see if I can make sure I get that Zoom meeting available for me to cover you if you join me. I think you just heard a little click there. Oh, and you can even see my Zoom there. Let me transition to something else. No, I guess you can't see it. All right, so Carlson, we got through. Let's get to Kenyon College. And we talked about this in the pro-union, pro-labor movement there, and how it's being led by Professor Ed Shortman, who was a guest on my program, along with one of the student workers there, Nick. And I thought they were very powerful, presented a powerful presentation. Let's just go back and set the table. This is what they were saying a couple days ago on Halitics. Ed, I want to ask you how the professors have responded to this movement. And I would say that a lot of them probably themselves, now not someone who has tenure like yourself, but an adjunct who they get paid virtually nothing, and the associates, are they very afraid for their jobs and reluctant or unwilling to take a stand because of that? All right, before we hear Shortman's answer, just again, so there's a movement at Kenyon College to unionize, to have support for the workers, the student workers at Kenyon. And Ed is backing it. Professor Shortman, who's a retired professor, Professor Emeritus, is backing it. Nick Becker is one of the student or former student organizers there. And my question was, how are other professors responding? Are they supporting it? And are they a little bit afraid for their job and therefore keeping their distance? So here's what Shortman has to say.
It's a good question, Hal. It's hard to tell. When the administration and the trustees in 2012, 2013 made an effort, and a real hard effort, to outsource the maintenance department, those two unions that Nick was talking about, to Sodexo, there was significant faculty pushback to that, going along with pushback from students, that finally resulted in the administration backing down from that outsourcing effort. In this particular fight, I get a sense, but even that, in whether it's 2012, 2013, or now, there is, especially among the non-tenured faculty, I think
All right, so he said there was a fear, and we skipped out, but he's saying especially among the non-tenured faculty of fear. And the reason I brought this up now is because we have some more information, and I think it's so disheartening because, and again, my thing is we have to create a unified block of poor, struggling, and working people who are fighting together for progressive change. And that means electing not Democrats, not Republicans, people who are not beholden to either of those two parties, but who are going to, actually have to support working people's agenda or they get voted out immediately. We saw from what AOC had to say that that's not where she is anymore. We've seen even with Bernie that, at least when it comes to the war machine, he's not going to go against it. We heard from Marianne Williamson, who's running as a Democrat for president against Joe Biden, that she supports the war in Ukraine. So I am demanding, insistent, we need an alternative to the two parties. And we need unified people on the left. And what Professor Shortman just said is, well, we're not necessarily seeing that. We saw it before. We saw it back in 2013 when there was talk of outsourcing the in-house services, especially the dining facilities, to Sodexo and other services, and there was a real pushback. We're not necessarily seeing that now. Although he acknowledged that back then also there had been reluctance. So I have got some emails that show back and forth between professor, and this does not identify anybody, and I don't want to identify or call anybody, or dox, I guess is the term, right? Dox, I'm going to dox anybody. But it's really, really disappointing to me that professors aren't willing to be at least somewhat in solidarity with the working students. So a professor writes to a student who says, aren't you ashamed that you're not supporting the students? Aren't you ashamed of that? And she responds, well, what I'm upset about is a misguided organizing campaign by you that is smashing the institution you and I both depend on to survive without even trying to understand the consequences of what you are doing. So it's very condescending. By the way, I see Jason's calling. Jason, I'll get to you in just one sec. Thank you so much. Let me see if I can, so make sure you can hear. So Jason, you should now be able to hear me. And I'm going to see if I can mute you so I don't hear you. There we go. We'll get to Jason in a minute. So very condescending by the professor, and also reflects, does it not, that fear, the fear that she could lose her privileged spot. And she goes on to say, it's obnoxious for you to attack me baselessly. I don't know that she attacked her. She said, well, are you ashamed? And then the professor says, if Kenyon fails, will you contribute to my GoFundMe? Now, I get it. You're an employee. You have actually a pretty nice job as a professor. You sure as heck don't want to lose it. But that fear that the professor expresses, it makes it impossible for them, the professor, to have the empathy needed in this situation, to be able to see another perspective. And you see later on, and I don't know if it was to the same student, but there was another text, and it's just ugliness. And here it is, the professor writing, you're a bit of a snot. Because they dare to stand up for themselves and fight against the elites. And I mean it financially, but you're a professor, you're an academic elite at a school like Kenyon, which is elite liberal arts college. But I mean, to me, this is when you see this, when I saw this, my first response is Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and the Democratic and Republican establishments are laughing their asses off because of the fighting, the infighting, the division within what should be a united progressive front. Let's go to Jason. Jason, you've been waiting patiently. I really appreciate it. Thanks for calling. Good morning.
Yes, Hal, can you hear me now?
I sure can. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's just there's kind of a reverberation or echo. I don't know. It's like you have two different audio sources feeding the
Was
phone.
that on the stream or just on the phone? I hope it was just on the phone, but if it was on the
It's on the phone. Like as I'm listening to you now, I hear I hear two howls. One is delayed about a quarter second.
All right, I will I'm going to address that right now. Go ahead.
It's usable, but it's
That's terrible though. I'll work on that right now. Can you let me take this off. That didn't help.
and the audio is muted on my side. So I mean, my computer audio is muted where I was listening to.
I'm not going to say anything. Just make your point. If you can make your point. Now I hear the double audio. Like, go ahead, please.
Yeah, sorry. I guess I'm going off in a different direction here, but wanted to catch you. Well, first off, it's really good to hear you back on the air or on the wires or whatever it is. So that's great. The point I wanted to make was so I caught your recorded show yesterday. And I wanted to talk about Mariannes Williamson. I thought your reasoning for not supporting her was completely specious. I just wanted to kind of feed that back to you and see if I could get some clarification. One point was, I think you said, I'm paraphrasing, that that the fact that she made her living and she made her fortune on self-help books was not helpful. And then the second reason you gave for not supporting her, which was you referred to a clip that you played from Sunday's PDA, Progressive Democrats of America recording, and she said that she supported a negotiation of a settlement in Ukraine that allowed Ukraine to continue to exist. And you said that was the reason why you could not support her. I don't see what's wrong with either, selling books or supporting a settlement in Ukraine, a peaceful settlement that allows Ukraine to continue to exist. Anyway, just wanted to.
Hey, Jason, I really appreciate that. If you want to stick with me for a minute, I'll give you a chance to respond because I want to answer, but I don't want you to have to put up with that awful reverb. So if that's an issue, then
it's good now. It's
I think I mute. I figured out why you were getting it. I took off one of the two sources, and I do apologize. Still learning. It's always a work in progress. That's unfortunate. I'll never have the Mona Lisa finished, but doing the best I can here. Thank you for the very kind words. Let me respond to what you said about Marianne, and maybe my answer won't satisfy you, and you can tell me why it doesn't. And then and then I'm going to end the show because we're at the last segment, and I don't like to go too long. A and B, I got nothing after this. So here's my answers to what I have a real problem. Let me just start with the self-help stuff. I just feel like that's it's just and I believe strongly, and I think with evidence, that it's all BS. I think it's hustling. I think she's taking money from people. No, but I read some commentary. I read what Wikipedia has to say. Yeah. She came from, and if you send me some clips or quotes, I'll be happy to read them and revisit that. My impression is that it's not scientific in any way, that she's not an expert, and that she's a hustler who's taking money from people. Well, so that's let me just finish. Let me just finish what I'm going to say, and then you can go, and I'll let you get back on. I know I have the mic most of the time, so people want to get in, but so that's the first point. I'm not going to elaborate that. And again, thanks for calling. I don't know if we've ever talked before. So that's the response. I'm not going to belabor that, and I will reconsider if you present, what evidence you present, especially after the program. So with respect to Ukraine, my big issue there is she does support our continuing military provisioning to the Ukraine, and she said she wants it to be a guarantee that Ukraine will continue to exist before we stop the funding the war. And my response to that is it's a false choice. It's not like Ukraine is threatened with a loss of existence, except because we're continuing the war. If we sat down right now and negotiated with Russia and pushed them to negotiate with us and with China and for peace, I believe very strongly that would be the best way to assure Ukraine's continued surviving and being an independent country. I believe what she's saying is she's claiming if we don't continue provisioning them and facilitating the killing in Ukraine, then Ukraine will cease to exist. I believe it's just the opposite. I believe what we're doing right now is making it much more likely Ukraine will stop existing. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's my response.
When did she say that she wants to continue fighting? For no reason. She said she wants to have a negotiated settlement that allows Ukraine to continue to exist. And I believe that could be done tomorrow. She would support that. I don't hear her saying she wants the fighting to continue.
I mean, if you go to her website, she's very clear on that, and I think she says it in the clip too. I don't have the clip up right now. I can go back and look for it. I don't want to fumble around for it, but I think she's.
I didn't hear that. I listened to it. But
I may have I may not have played it, and maybe I misunderstood. So I'll look into it because I want to be fair to everyone. If you raise, I take seriously what you say, so I'll look very closely into it. We may have a bit of a disagreement. Let me ask you this because it may inform your position. Where do you stand on our continuing to support Ukraine? With all the the tanks and the...
I am, in fact, a little more hawkish. I agree that maybe there are opportunities in the past to avoid this war, but clearly Russia is the aggressor. And if it was all about securing their border in the Donbass area and the Russian majority areas, then maybe they would have taken that like they did Crimea. But instead, it went straight for the heart of the country. In Kiev, they launched most of their aggression from Belarus. They clearly were out to completely occupy and take over the country and turn it into a vassal state again. And you just know that if they get away with that, then Moldova is next. What else is next? Armenia, Azerbaijan, Georgia. I believe that Putin wants to reestablish a Russian empire, and this is mostly an imperialist move. With the pretense of, saving those Russians from the Azov Nazis, and I don't believe that. And I think if we were to allow Russia to do this with impunity, it would spell a lot of trouble in the future. So that's how I feel about it. I also support a negotiated settlement at this point. I think it's at a impasse where this is not going to go well and it's going to drag out. But I do think that we should be supporting them. We're faced with a Hobson's choice, bad versus much worse, and letting Putin reestablish his empire and aggressively move on other countries. I think that would be bad.
All right, I'm gonna leave that. I'll let you have the last word on that. And I lied a little bit because I said I was gonna go right after. But I have one more question for you now that I've got you, Jason. You step into the den. You don't get to leave. I mean, you can always hang up. How do you feel?
For 1 minute.
How do you feel about the third party, the challenges by Williamson and RFK? Are you open to them? Are you supportive of them, or do you think they're a distraction?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think Mariannes Williamson is bringing up a lot of the economic issues, and also education and other opportunity issues that are facing the working class, the beleaguered working class. that Biden and the institutional Democratic Party don't talk about. They love to harp on the social issues that don't win us elections. So whether Marianne advances to the presidency or not, I think it's a very much of a long shot, but I think her presence there is valuable in terms of getting the progressive part of the debate out there. As for RFK Jr., he can go take a hike.
All right. So we're even there. We disagree to a pretty significant extent, although we both love the challenges. Yeah. Jason, thanks for the call. Have a great day. Really appreciate it. I'll be back tomorrow. Hope to talk to you again soon. And we'll let Jason go at this point. I know he had to run anyway. Thanks for watching. Thanks for tuning in. Please share. Please like. Please subscribe.